Idiot Mystic is monetized now, at least on Spotify. Okay. I know that wasn't the most enthusiastic, but I'm hyped. Which means, naturally, the first thing we have to do is talk about a secret government UFO program. A ranch in Utah where people allegedly bring home hauntings. And a book that somehow got through the Department of Defense pre-publication review process. Great. Very normal. Very safe. Apparently YouTube loves this, but it still gives me 0 views. Spotify seems to be thrilled. I don't know how you feel about it, but really, thank you. The show is doing well because you keep showing up for these weird little, apparently, golden eggs. Some of them explode on Spotify, and then on YouTube they get 3 views and 1 confused comment from someone named Greg. And I'm okay with that. The right people find these episodes when they need them. And I think this one is kind of important. I know I haven't finished talking about the other books I'm talking about, but I feel like switching between them helps keep me fresh. So today we're starting a series on Skinwalkers at the Pentagon by James T. Lacatski, Colm A. Kelleher, and George Knapp. I know it sounds like another UFO book, especially with the title, that might begin with someone's uncle seeing a light over a dairy farm in 1978, but this book is written by people who were inside the program. Lacatski was the Defense Intelligence Agency program manager. Kelleher helped run the contractor side through Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies. And George Knapp has been reporting on this stuff for decades and is actually like a legitimately respected journalist. The book opens with something you might not expect. Department of Defense Pre-Publication Review. Case 2058. Cleared for public release May 11th, 2021. Now, I have to be precise. That doesn't mean the Department of Defense is saying, yes, every claim in this book is true. Please prepare your alien welcome baskets. This clearance means the manuscript was reviewed and allowed to be published. The government let these claims come out through the official gate. That's a strange thing to observe by itself. So I'd say the frame for this book is simple. UAP are real. There is enough evidence for the phenomenon. The government has said the videos are real, and the intelligence community has said some cases remain unexplained. Pilots, sensors, radar, infrared, some visual observation, military reports, and Congress's clear interest, all of that is there. Now what we're talking about is interpretation. Are we looking at foreign adversary tech, secret American aerospace programs, sensor errors, plasma organisms of some kind, something non-human? Maybe it's some weird blend of all of these categories. I think Skinwalkers at the Pentagon forces one especially uncomfortable possibility onto the table. The phenomenon may not respect the boundaries between machine and mind, object and witness, or even metalcraft and ghost. And that is exactly where Idiot Mystic lives. Apparently, this is my house now. Let's start with the door. The story starts with a man named James T. Lacatski. In the book, Lacatski is not presented as a crystal necklace guy, a UFO convention guy, or someone who calls into late night radio because he's being chased by the men in black. He's a scientist and intelligence professional. He worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency, and his background was in missiles, directed energy, and electronic warfare. In normal human language, he was paid to think about dangerous technology before it surprised America. In 2007, Lacatski reads Hunt for the Skinwalker, The earlier book by Colm Kelleher and George Knapp about the Utah Ranch. The ranch is already famous in certain circles. Lights, orbs, cattle mutilations, impossible animals, strange aerial objects, the whole paranormal buffet. A reasonable person might read that book and say, that was spooky. But Lacatski read it and thought, could this be relevant to national security? Which I guess is either insane or exactly the sort of question intelligence people are supposed to ask. Because imagine you work in a defense office. Your job is threat warning, and you read reports of objects moving in ways that don't match known aircraft. You hear that military pilots have seen things, and you hear that other countries might be studying the same mystery. Then you find a private ranch where the phenomena appear repeatedly, close to the ground, sometimes in front of credible witnesses, with a history of strange physical and psychological effects. From the outside, it just sounds like a campfire horror story, but I think from inside a defense bureaucracy, it became a target-rich environment. I just saw something move from the corner of my eye. It was kind of terrifying. Okay, I'm just gonna keep record. This lamp is flickering. It's kind of terrifying. Okay, I'm just gonna keep talking. I don't know what I was saying. Where were we? Okay. In June 2007, Lacatski writes to Robert Bigelow. Bigelow is the billionaire aerospace entrepreneur who owns Skinwalker Ranch at that point. He has already funded NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science, which studied both UFOs and survival of consciousness. Bigelow is a strange figure in the best way possible. A real estate empire, space habitats, aerospace contracting. I think the deepest rich guy side quest imaginable, which is, are we alone in the universe, and do we survive after death? I respect it. I think it's what I would do. Some billionaires buy yachts. Bigelow bought the weirdest ranch in America and hired scientists to see what was in the abyss. Lacatski asked to visit the ranch because he wanted to understand what kind of threat was being reported there. And he went to the ranch, and according to the book, during that visit, inside one of the ranch buildings, Lacatski sees something. A technological-looking object or apparition, close to him, in daylight, indoors, visible to him alone. Now, that detail is really important, because if 3 people see a craft in the sky, the normal conversation is radar, optical data, misidentification, drones, balloons, classified aircraft. If one person in a room sees what looks like a technological object and nobody else sees it, I think the conversation gets a lot weirder. Was it a hallucination, a targeted perception, some kind of consciousness event, something staged by the phenomenon? The book doesn't solve this at all, but I think what matters for the historical chain is that the experience appears to have affected Lacatski deeply enough that he moved forward. This is the weird hinge of this whole story. An intelligence officer visits a paranormal ranch, sees something that he can't explain, and then helps build the largest government-funded UFO investigation of the modern era. Now enter Senator Harry Reid. Reid is one of those figures who gets kind of ignored in online UFO arguments. People reduce him to the senator who funded the UFO thing, but this book gives him a lot more weight than that. Reid was not acting alone. The program had support from Senators Ted Stevens and Daniel Inouye. Stevens had his own aviation experience and his own history with a sighting. Inouye had deep power in defense appropriations. Reid had a friendship with Bigelow and an interest in what he saw as a legitimate national security issue. This was not a bunch of guys meeting in a basement with a poster of a flying saucer on the wall, although that's always fun. It was senior political power. defense money, intelligence bureaucracy, and a private aerospace contractor converging around a question that almost nobody wanted to say out loud. What if some of these objects are real technology, and we don't know whose technology it is? The program that emerged was AAWSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. We've talked about this a lot, but anyway. A lot of people know the term AATIP because of the 2017 New York Times story and the public-facing UFO discourse that followed. Skinwalkers at the Pentagon argues that AAWSAP is the deeper and more accurate name for the original program. AATIP becomes the name used in a more limited, public-facing way. AAWSAP was broader, stranger, and much more ambitious. And the scope was crazy. The Defense Intelligence Agency solicitation asked for advanced aerospace research across categories like lift, propulsion, control, power generation, spatial and temporal translation, materials, signature reduction, human effects, human interface, and directed energy. That list is really important because it shows the government wasn't just saying, please collect some spooky stories. It was asking what the next generation of aerospace performance would look like. What would the threat profile be if something can move, hide, accelerate, affect people, and operate outside familiar assumptions? In 2008, Bigelow creates BAASS, Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, to respond to the contract. BAASS wins it, but apparently they were also the sole bidder, so that's interesting. Colm Kelleher is hired to build the organization. Within months, they begin hiring investigators, intelligence profiles, intelligence professionals, analysts, scientists, engineers, medical consultants, and field teams. The image in your head shouldn't be men in black sunglasses and memory erasers. It should be more like a bizarre startup funded by the Pentagon, built in Vegas, staffed by former military and intelligence people, with a mission statement that sounds like it was written by Lockheed Martin on mushrooms. So after this, they have to move fast. They have to produce reports. They have to build security infrastructure, collect cases, and study historical databases. They also have to investigate new sightings and figure out what, if anything, can be measured. And then almost immediately, the Tic Tac case enters the story. Douglas Kurth, a retired Marine lieutenant colonel, becomes one of the early BAASS hires. He had been connected to the 2004 Nimitz event, the case now famous because Commander David Fravor and other witnesses described an object that looked like a white Tic Tac, moving in ways that seemed to defy normal aircraft performance. Remember, in the public mind, the Tic Tac is a post-2017 story. In this book, it is already part of the AAWSAP bloodstream in 2008 and 2009. The case is being examined before it becomes a meme, before it becomes news, before people start arguing about it on Reddit. This is one reason this book feels very significant. It moves the timeline backward, officially. It shows a formal program dealing with cases before the public was invited into the conversation. The big idea of Episode 1 is that AAWSAP was not just a UFO program. It was an anomaly program wearing an aerospace disguise. The people involved were trying to understand UAP as technology, threat, physics, sometimes biology, and as something that affects witnesses. This is why the Skinwalker connection is so explosive. If the program had only studied the Tic Tac, it would fit a lot more comfortably into the national security box. Unknown aircraft, pilot safety, airspace incursions, advanced propulsion, that kind of stuff. It's already big. Skinwalker breaks the box, because at Skinwalker, The reports don't stay in the sky. They come into houses and affect bodies. They show up as orbs and shadows and weird electromagnetic events, and as what the book later calls hitchhiker effects. I think this is why skeptics hate this book, and I suppose I get it. If you're trying to make UAP respectable, Skinwalker Ranch is a nightmare. You finally convince Congress to take pilots seriously, and then Skinwalker Ranch walks in wearing a wolf mask, but it seems like that discomfort is the point. A sanitized UAP narrative is easier to sell. Shiny objects, Navy pilots, radar data. These serious men in suits talking about flight safety. That version can get hearings and reports, and it can get normal people to stop laughing. This book argues that the real phenomenon might be a lot messier than that. It may include the craft in the sky, as well as the footsteps in the hallway. That doesn't mean all of these stories are true. It means the investigators didn't allow themselves to cut away the inconvenient parts just because they sounded embarrassing. And that's the main reason this book is so important. Let's come back to the Dobser point, because this is where people get really sloppy. And that's saying a lot coming from Idiot Mystic. The book being cleared for public release is not the same thing as government endorsement. The front matter of the book explicitly says the views are the author's views, and public release clearance does not imply official endorsement or factual accuracy. That sentence is very important, but so is the clearance. It means Lacatski, Kelleher, and Knapp put this material through a process designed to prevent classified information from being released. The government reviewed it and allowed it out. In a topic where people have spent decades asking, who knew what and what were they allowed to say, that's a meaningful fact. So the intelligent position is neither the Pentagon confirmed werewolves, nor nothing to see here. The intelligent position might be senior insiders wrote a detailed account of a real government program. The manuscript cleared review. Some claims remain unverified. The existence of the program and the seriousness of the inquiry are no longer fringe. And that's a strong place to stand, and more than enough to begin. I'd say by the end of episode 1, which is kind of right now, the board looks like this. A DIA analyst reads about Skinwalker Ranch. He visits and has an experience. Robert Bigelow owns the ranch, has money and infrastructure. Harry Reid, Ted Stevens, and Daniel Inouye help create the funding pathway. Then BAASS wins the contract and AAWSAP begins. The program starts gathering cases, studying aerospace performance, building a data warehouse, looking at the Tic Tac, and gets ready to investigate the weirdest edges of the phenomenon. It feels like the door is open, and in the next episode, I'll try to go through it. Because once AAWSAP starts interacting with Skinwalker Ranch, the story gets a lot darker. People don't just see things. They bring them home. Or at least that's what the book claims. The next episode is about the dinner, the ranch, the blue orbs, and the idea that the phenomenon can behave less like a spacecraft and a lot more like an infection, which is an insane sentence. Sadly, it's also the next episode. This has been Idiot Mystic. Thank you for helping the show get monetized. Seriously. Like, subscribe, do the normal internet rituals, join the Discord, and send this to the one friend who you think might be emotionally stable enough to hear the phrase Defense Intelligence Agency Paranormal Hitchhiker Effect without killing the vibe. Keep your eyes open, keep your feet on the ground, and don't invite anything home unless it's a stray cat. And even then, I guess, I don't know, there's a lot going on there, so you have to be careful with stray cats. Bye.